All right, Tom Hopper. People know you as Luther, who has some gigantic arms, but Tom Hopper has pretty gigantic arms himself. So then maybe that's why you got the role. Maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, I want to know what you eat to put on muscle, because you put on muscle and you stay pretty lean. So what are your go-to foods? Let's kind of go down the list. Like we can talk about them individually. Like what would you say number one? What's the number one food that you eat when you're building muscle?
Number one staple is probably eggs, actually. I'd say eggs is daily intake for sure. It's pretty high.
How many?
Sometimes, I mean, if I'm trying to stay a little bit leaner, I'll do like 3 whole eggs, 4 whole eggs, and then maybe another 4 egg whites or 5 egg whites. So pretty high dose of eggs. But if I'm not too worried about staying really, really low body fat, then I'll just have like 8 eggs, and I don't worry about, I think they're such a nutrient dense food, and I feel great on them. Then after that would be beef and chicken. They're daily staples without a doubt, lunch and dinner, and also lamb as well. I love my lamb. It's a little bit, for whenever I'm trying to stay a little bit leaner, lamb again, it's very, very high in fat, but again, I feel good on it. But if I try to keep the calories down, I won't have as much lamb. But if I don't care and I just want the extra calories for putting on muscle, then lamb's all good.
How many grams of protein you take in a day?
It's a good question. I don't actually track it.
Yeah.
I don't track it. I eat until I feel full of the right foods, and then and if I feel like if I'm checking if I'm putting on muscle, if I'm putting on size, then it's working for me. So I don't actually track how much I'm eating in terms of protein, but I imagine it's probably north of a gram per pound of body weight for sure.
It's when you say beef, like what's your go-to beef staple? Is it ground? Is it filet? What do you go for?
Ground beef's so easy, man. Like, and it's so versatile. Like I can whip up a meal so quickly with ground beef. I can make up burger patties really quickly, smash them on a grill, cook them up, have some avocado, some eggs with it. Delicious. Like, it's perfect. So ground beef is probably my go-to just for ease and pace of eating, especially if I'm on the go or with the kids or whatever. But I do love me a ribeye. Yeah.
So you're taking in a good amount of animal protein as is. Do you supplement with creatine on top of that, or are you getting enough creatine from your?
When I'm looking to put on size, absolutely. I have 5 to 6 grams of creatine a day. Right now I'm off creatine. Like I like to take a little bit of break from it. Sometimes it affects my stomach if I'm having like too much of it. So I take creatine intermittently depending on what my goal is. If I really want to put on muscle, creatine is proven, and anecdotally I've just had such benefit from it every time I want to put on size. It just works. But I try to like come off it again as I get to go on camera. Mm-hmm. So preparation is great to put on the size, but I do find I hold more water weight in like my face and stuff. So for on camera, it's not as beneficial. So I tend to come off it closer to the time of shooting if I can.
Does the camera exacerbate that too? Like, I
think so. Yeah. With the times that I've seen myself, I'm not a big watcher of myself, of the stuff I do anyway, so I tend to avoid it because I just feel awkward watching myself. But the times I've seen myself on camera when I've been taking creatine, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a rounder face than normal. Yeah,
it's interesting. I don't know. Have you tried like almost microdosing creatine throughout the day?
No, that's interesting.
It was Dr. Darren Kando that kind of mentioned that to me. He's a creatine researcher. He's like, so he says that creatine, like if you stay on it long enough, that the water retention should go away. Personally, like, okay, let me caveat this with, I love creatine. Like I definitely use it. Yeah. More often than not, I take like 3 grams. I take like a low dose. And then if I really want to put on size, I'll add more.
Yeah.
I absolutely hold water from creatine.
Yeah.
Even if I'm on it for a year, I will hold water with it, and it doesn't go away. But I did notice that taking smaller dosages throughout the day, like 1 or 2 grams periodically throughout the day, did make a difference with how much water I held, for sure. But I hold water in the face, and I definitely hold water like in the like love handle area. It's just like water just holds there, and then within 3 or 4 days of coming off of it, it sucks right up. So it's just like that, just like periodize it, like take it with trying to put on muscle. You're not worried about some water retention.
Yeah,
sure.
I popped a link down below for Creatine Gummies, 50% off of them. So after today's video, check them out. 50% off allulose sweetened gummies. These have 1.5 grams of creatine per gummy. So it makes it so you can low dose your creatine. You're talking about getting in shape for summer, might make some sense. Helps preserve a little muscle mass by keeping your strength high, even if you're in a caloric deficit. There's countless bodies of research when it comes down to creatine. So I'm not blowing any smoke. The stuff is legit, but the little gummies make it easy to sort of microdose creatine throughout the day. So I find I don't get the water retention that I would get if I were to just drink like a 5 or 10 gram bolus of it at one sitting. Not to mention 50% off is pretty darn awesome. So that link is in the top line of the description underneath this video. Their new sour apple flavor, holy smokes, especially with no added sugar in it, off the charts.
That's really interesting. I might try that because did you find it made a difference in terms of water weight? Or
oh yeah, for sure. I definitely did. I definitely noticed less in my face, but I've also found like the sweet spot for me, even though some people would say you need more to have an effect, maybe it's because I eat enough protein that all I need is enough to put me over the edge. Because I probably am getting 5 or 6, probably at least 4 or 5 grams of creatine just through my diet per day.
For sure.
And then maybe just adding that extra 2 or 3 grams that I'm getting is just putting it just enough to get me that ergogenic aid that I need. And anything above and beyond that is just maybe too much for me, and it's just going into more water weight. So definitely a difference.
Because I also find that when I'm eating more red meat, which obviously has a higher level of creatine in it, I find that I can maintain size more than if I was just eating like chicken breast or whatever, right? Or fish. Yeah. So I think I am getting like plenty in my diet, but I might try doing that. The microdosing thing is interesting. Yeah, not heard of that. That's
not cool. A lot of evidence on it. It was just something that he suggested to me at that time. He's like, you could always try just spacing it out because so
you're not dumping it.
There's a rate of absorption and a rate of, so he's like, maybe, you can actually utilize this better and you just try it. And I did, and it worked.
Interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well, you mentioned fish though. So is when you just now, like, what about, is your fish intake? How much, what's that look like?
Yeah, I probably eat fish like, 3-4 times a week. I try and mix it up. Usually I try and get wild caught as much as possible. I mean, the jury's still out on what is actually wild anymore because everything to a certain degree seems to be farmed, but I try and get as wild as possible. I have wild Alaskan sockeye salmon a lot back home in the UK, and loch trout, Scottish loch trout, which is from the lochs of Scotland. And that's what's so great about loch trout as well. It cooks in its own oils, so you can grill it, and then it releases its own oils. So you get this amazing crispy skin from its own oils.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's really good. So it's very high in omega-3, and I feel great on that as well. It's really good.
Have you seen, or maybe you might have seen some of my videos on it in the past, but interesting evidence on omega-3s and protein synthesis? Have you seen that?
Oh, no. What's this?
Yeah, no, there's just, basically it increases, it's called the phosphorylation of P70S6K. It's just kind of like the main compound that's activating protein synthesis. And omega-3s, especially even like in a post-workout setting, even though they're higher fat, which may or may not be good post-workout, jury's kind of out on that. But it's supposed to increase muscle protein synthesis to a significant degree and also decrease muscle protein breakdown. So there's an evidence with kind of using fish as a post-workout potentially is better for stimulating muscle protein synthesis.
Good to know.
I think it's more so about having adequate amounts of omega-3 or omega-3 index being relatively high. I think it's more of what it's about versus an acute intake of omega-3.
Right,
so it's more like dose your omega-3 appropriately so you're getting it elevated.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. What else would you say is on your muscle building list?
I would say if I'm muscle building, especially to get my extra calories in, avocado is on there. Because for me, like I'm naturally like on the skinnier side. Like when I was younger, I had to work really hard calories wise to get them in. So when I eat a very clean diet, like I won't do any kind of dirty bulk. So I'm eating completely whole foods the whole time. So avocado is a great way to utilize a few extra fats, and it tastes great. Goes great with a burger. What else? Whey protein, for sure. I think just to be able to get my extra protein in, to make sure I'm just hitting that goal. It's probably the only processed food I eat is whey protein. I don't have it year round, but I utilize it when it's needed to keep a bit more muscle on it, especially for muscle building.
Do you have a preference of isolate or concentrate?
I find that I respond better for isolate. Just I think it's a higher quality protein. I've utilized casein a little bit as well, like as a pre-bed one, because I hear it's like a slower release through the night, and that's worked well for me as well. Certainly wake up feeling more like satiated if I've had that. But yeah, I've just always gone for isolate because from what I've read, it's just a higher quality protein.
Yeah, but it's isolated protein versus having the other milk solids in it.
Right, but concentrate is. Did they say that concentrate is actually probably better pre-workout because it's faster absorbed?
Well, isolate is faster absorbed.
Oh, isolate is okay.
Concentrate, I've changed my mind a little bit on this. Something that's irritated some people is that I am still very pro isolate.
Yeah,
like the bar is already set high. I used to hold isolate in extremely high regard and hold concentrate in fairly low regard.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Now concentrate is, I almost view them in slightly different camps because isolate is pure protein with nothing else really, like no lactose or minimal lactose depending on how it's processed, but very, very just pure protein. Concentrate is almost more of a food, right? So you have lactoferrin, you have the milk solids. So I really used to like isolate in the sense that I wouldn't say I was anti-dairy before, but I viewed dairy as like, I didn't really want to have a lot of dairy. I saw dairy as somewhat inflammatory and I just wanted the protein from it. Now, as I've been more seasoned in this, I find that there's benefits to the different fats in dairy. There's benefits to the different solids in dairy. There's benefits to some of those milk proteins that are in dairy. And so that when you get the full spectrum sort of concentrate, you're also getting the lactoferrin, the things that can help with digestion and it can help with the gut. So there is a benefit there. So I view concentrate as more of a food. I view isolate as more of like a quick shot of protein.
Yes.
Again, it is pretty negligible difference, but yes, there is lactose in concentrate. So people might feel a little bit more icky when they have it.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably why I made the transition to isolate in the first place. As you're talking about that, I remember when I used to, because whey concentrate used to be the one that was readily available. It was so easy
cheaper
to get. It was cheaper. And I remember having more kind of gut issues. So I'm not sure whether that was the lactose in the concentrate that I was responding to, but I found that when I went on to isolate, I just felt much cleaner, sharper, like I didn't have any of that gut response. But that's also the same with me, because one of the other things I was going to say is like I do utilize raw dairy in my diet when I'm trying to build muscle. And occasionally now, actually, even when I'm not too worried about it, I'm just like maintaining, but because of the health benefits of it. But I do find with processed dairy, if I ever have too much dairy that's homogenized and has been pasteurized, then I tend to not respond as well. And I definitely feel more of a histamine response in my body. Like I get like allergies and stuff, which is very unlike me. I don't get them. And then if I have too much dairy, I'll get that. But with raw milk, if I utilize it carefully and just have it like a couple of times a week, I respond pretty well to it. I get that gut response.
Do you ever get a histamine issue with avocados? Being that they're
too much avocado for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's it's interesting. I mean, that kind of seals the deal. It's just like because avocados are high in histamine,
very
right?
high,
so you end up. I get that same way too. It's not. It doesn't manifest as the traditional kind of bloating that happens with that. That's a different situation. That's the fiber content. That's the fat content that can be disruptive. And prebiotic fiber effect.
Yeah.
Like I typically don't like to eat avocado. I used to like it in the morning, and then I'd realize I'd get kind of digested. So I just have it at night and make it my wife's problem in bed that night. But it's
don't we all? Yeah.
But also if I overeat it, I'm the same way. So I don't know if you've ever tried taking quercetin.
Quercetin, no. With avocado, I know of quercetin, but no,
it has a pretty powerful histamine effect in terms of kind of negating that. I learned that from
that's good to
Dr.
know.
Kyle Gillette. Yeah, it's a very helpful tip. So quercetin, just pretty low dose, just 500 or so. And it kind of quells that quite a bit, so you don't get the same. I get very like sniffly and kind of like almost feel like get puffy through here.
Yeah, especially in the summer months because we're surrounded by fields as well. So there's lots of like grass in the air, and it's the pollen in the air is quite high, and I don't normally get it, but I did notice the amount of avocado I was introducing. I thought these are high in histamine. This might be why I'm getting a bit of an allergy response. So would you take quercetin every time you have avocado, or
So, and I try not to take quercetin all the time. I try to save it for when I'm like having. I don't take it every time I have avocado, but if I'm going to have more than like if I'm going to have guacamole, if I'm going to have Mexican food, and I'm going to have like a bunch of because if I'm going to have guacamole, I'm going to eat 2 avocados worth of guacamole.
For sure,
right? So like that's going to send me for sure. That'll send me. And the same kind of thing with. certain fermented foods, obviously high in histamine. So like I love kimchi, but if I overdo it on the kimchi, I run into the same boat.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's so interesting. You've literally, like we talk about, like us being in parallel, like the way we are with what we're eating. But I found exactly the same thing this summer. Like I'm just having loads of sauerkraut and avocado and stuff, and had that response. I was like, this is weird. Like normally this would come from having too much dairy or stuff, but then I did my research. It was like, oh, avocado and fermented foods are mad high in histamine.
There's what is it? DAE or DME? I can't remember what it is that you can take. That's basically if you have a histamine issue where you have lack the enzyme that helps break down that in the foods. Can't remember if it's DAE or DME. I think it's DME. It's a supplement that you can take along with it that'll actually assist that breakdown. But I'm hesitant to take something that is sort of exogenously adding this enzyme in, because then I have this consistent concern of enabling my body to have to require that. So I'd rather take quercetin, which just kind of quells the secondary effect of it. I also think that there's some evidence that basically the gut dynamic and potentially leaky gut and these things that happen when there's a disrupted gut, or that can contribute to a histamine issue.
For sure, yeah.
It's realistically one of the quintessential signs of like bad gut health is having that. There's gut testing that you can do that looks at that. But either way, that's where things like the whey protein concentrate actually might be of benefit, because the lactoferrin can have an impact on gut health in the first place. So even though it might be a little bit difficult in the beginning, kind of dosing, that was what I was finding. I was like, okay, whey protein concentrate doesn't make me feel amazing, so I'll go to isolate. So what I did is I just basically was removing the thing that was causing me a slight bit of discomfort, when in reality, I went back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to deal with a week of sort of uneasiness. I'm going to titrate my dose accordingly. And then now I can handle concentrate just fine. And I feel like it's improved my gut health. So it might be worth giving it a shot with it.
Yeah. That would be, be interesting to try that. Because I've also just introduced a colostrum recently. There's a lot of research about this colostrum thing. So I've just started recently. So I'm not sure but in terms of like gut health.
Personally, I'm a huge fan of it. I know like when I talk about it, it's 50-50. Some people are going to tell you that's total snake oil, it doesn't work. And then the other people have been like, that stuff saved my life. I had a gnarly parasite last August. And I swear up and down that colostrum is what brought me back to earth. Like it was like I ended up with 7 ulcers from it, and it was just terrible. And so when it came down to gut health, the colostrum, it flat out made a difference for me. So I'm a believer. I know the evidence is not strong, but it's also most of the colostrums on the market are heated to such a degree that they lose the effectiveness anyway. So I think it's one of those things, it's a relatively inexpensive thing for people to try. You notice it pretty quick. So if it works, keep on it. If it doesn't, then no.
That's the thing with all these things. I think if, some people won't feel benefit, but if you do, why not keep it in?
What about any carbohydrates? Like what carbohydrates do you add?
If I'm building, for sure, like I smash sweet potato, like I'm buying bags of that stuff. Lots of sweet potato. I'll have plenty of other root vegetables. Like I say, like all my carbs come from whole foods. So beetroot, carrots, parsnips, turnip, you name it. Like if it's a root vegetable, I'll have them.
Like
and I love
like a Viking.
What is it?
Like a Viking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I love experimenting. Root veg is such a versatile food as well in terms of the amount of colors available. But in the kitchen, like I love cooking and I love experimenting with root vegetables, and you can get so much flavor out of them. So they're just delicious as well. So I really enjoy my putting on size with some carbohydrates, because they're so versatile. So I do all sorts of stuff with them.
Aside from what about any use of honey or anything like that?
Yeah, like I love honey post-workout. Like, I mean, honey tastes delicious. I'll have like raw honey. I get like local raw honey as well, which also really helps with any kind of, allergies as well. Like it's amazing we call it in the UK, we call it hay fever, right? I don't know if you call it hay fever in the US, but we call it hay fever. And it's been widely known now that if you have your local honey, because it's made from your local pollen, it will curb your hay fever. So we give it to my son every morning because he gets bad grass allergies, and it curbs it completely. So but it's delicious, and it's really powerful post workout. I feel it restores glycogen stores really well, and like it feels great on the brain as well. You feel very kind of like sharp after honey, I find.
I feel like honey's making a big resurgence right now. Like it's content that I create on honey just explodes, whether it's YouTube or Instagram, like people's interest in it, which is awesome because I feel like it's.
Well, what's interesting as well is it didn't, like you were saying this on one of your videos as well, is how it doesn't have the same response as if you just get random processed sugar, right?
No, it's wildly
completely different. Even on like your glycemic index, I think, right?
And glycemic index, and there's, isomaltose, which is normally manufactured, right? But bees have an enzyme, so when they're making honey, the enzyme that they're adding is actually creating isomaltose, which really is an indigestible sugar for humans. So you're getting a certain degree of prebiotic fiber that comes in with honey, and it's essentially a prebiotic sugar. So isomaltose is used in all kinds of artificial things.
Yeah.
They create it artificially, but just because of the enzymatic reaction that happens to the bees, it changes. There's also trehalose, which is just a different kind of sugar that is very interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
There's various enzymes that are in honey that change things. So there's a multitude of reasons as to why honey just is processed in the body differently.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, yes, it's still basically sucrose. You're basically a combination of fructose and glucose with it. But there are a number of studies that look at both rodents and humans that are looking at, yes, when you compare 70 grams of sugar from honey versus 70 grams of processed sugar, it's a different impact.
Yeah.
Or they did one study, I can't remember, it was very interesting. I can link out to it. It was like a breakfast that had, I want to say it was like a croissant or something that had like straight up sugar versus equal amounts of honey. And the area under the curve with glucose, and they're following fasting glucose levels, significantly different, eating the same amount of calories, same amount of carbohydrates, same amount of sugar, just one from honey. And it was a wildly different response. So, and then of course, we've seen it replicated in other human studies, but we've seen it more clinically and mechanistically in rodents. And rodents have seen like longer studies where you see, okay, there's actually a fat loss effect when we match for calories and using honey versus sugar. So it probably has to do with, yes, a lower insulin response. It could be a number of things. It's just very wild.
Yeah. I saw the same thing with dates, like medjool dates, that even though you might have like, 50, 60, 70 grams of sugar if you have a few dates, it doesn't have the same glycemic response at all. I'm not sure if that's because of the high fiber content in dates maybe, or, that it curbs that, but there's something about certain natural sugars that just don't have the same response.
I think dates have trehalose in them as well. The hard part with dates is, as you know, is like there's concentrated sugar. So it's like if you say, okay, I'm going to give you X amount of carbohydrates with this amount of sugar, or I'm going to give you the same amount of sugar with dates. Like a lot of times you're looking at like a big handful here versus like 2 dates, right? Mm-hmm. So although dates it's so easy to overdo them. It's so easy to overdo them. I mean, they're concentrated, they're dried. So
and they're delicious.
3 dates and you're at 40 carbs. I mean, like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
So
all sugar as well.
So it's a yes if you're comparing gram for gram, but I don't know many people that are just consuming like the gram for gram amount of dates.
No way.
Yeah.
No, people are smashing them for sure.
What about foods you don't eat? And I don't ever like putting labels and demonizing foods. Like I understand like, foods are, it's a delicate issue for people, right? So I don't want to necessarily demonize anything, but your own anecdotal experience, like any foods that you don't eat, things that you say, you know what, I'm building muscle, but I want to do this a certain way. These are things that are somewhat off limits for me.
Yeah. So a term that I sort of, when people, because people always ask me, what diet are you on or whatever. And I always used to say, like, I like to eat what's of the earth, right? What earth provided. So like I don't eat anything processed. So like processed sugar, I don't really eat any processed sugar, but I'll eat sugar from fruit. I won't eat, I try to avoid bread, and that's even like sourdough, right? Like I know sourdough is making a bit of a comeback as well, but for me, I just don't respond well to wheat in any kind of format really. I think, well, certainly not in the UK and the States, but I just feel more bloated. I feel like it's not a good carbohydrate that's utilized in my body. So for me, it's all about trial and error of trying something. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I get rid of it. For me, it's all about feeling good, and bread just doesn't agree with me. So I don't eat bread, but that also goes the same with too much pasta. Like I'll have it every now and again. Like in Europe, I'll have it occasionally, but in general, I don't respond well to it just because of the wheat and the flour content. Okay, yeah. So with processed sugar, I haven't eaten processed sugar for maybe like 12 years now, 11 years. And it was honestly the best thing that I took out of my diet. Just avoiding anything that's in a packet on the shelves in the supermarket. I remember someone told me once, well, when I watched a video about trying to avoid the center of the supermarket and sticking to the outside, because most things in the middle of a supermarket, even in the UK, I mean, the States has it probably worse, but even in the UK, you know, everything's got sugar in it that's in a packet. So, and I always say to people, you know, read the label, because there's always something hidden in there. And there's some great companies now that are actually making foods that would traditionally would have a ton of sugar in, and they're making, you know, much healthier versions of them again, thank goodness. But yeah, I find that from the inflammatory effect as well from having sugar, if I have something like that, I just don't function as well. My brain is a mess. I have brain fog, and so I try and avoid it.
What's your take on artificial sweeteners in that case, if you're subbing out sugar?
Yeah, like I mean, no, I'm no expert on what artificial sweeteners are doing. I do think there's an effect beyond calorie intake, right? I think that everything has an effect on the microbiome. Artificial sweeteners, you know, there's ones like aspartame and stuff that I would absolutely avoid, because, you know, I've seen enough studies on that stuff to make me wary of them. Stevia is the one that I probably, and monk fruit are the two that I will have. If I see them, I kind of go, that's okay, I can have that occasionally. I wouldn't want to make it a daily staple. I have found that if I've had things, there's certain like protein shakes and stuff that are sweetened with stevia that if I have on a daily basis and have it as part of a daily staple, then I tend to feel not as good. So again, it's one of those things that you can utilize every now and again, but I wouldn't want to make it, it's just not real food, right? Like it's gone through a process. So I was just trying to avoid having that in my diet.
I feel like there's like a dopamine hit that comes from, like, you know, you're subbing out one thing, and I don't have a problem with artificial sweeteners or natural sweeteners really. I look at it from the case of, I cut out the sugar for a reason. Mm-hmm. Like, do I really want to swap it out for something just to give me like a false high that hit? Like, so again, I don't have a problem with it, but I just ask myself this internal dialogue of like, what are you seeking? Like, what are you seeking? If I want something sweet, candidly, I'll probably just have some honey. Like, I mean, it's you know, I'm not afraid of them. I don't stay away from them with any crazy vengeance. Yeah. But I'm not going to go seek it out. Right. Yeah, it's likewise. More. Ben Bickman put it really well when I had him. You know, Dr. Ben Bickman. Yeah. Yeah. Put it really well. He's like, you know, he's said the same thing. He's like, actually, like, you know, scientifically, like, not a lot of stuff that I'm like scared about. He's like, it's just like, it's going to be a moment of indulgence. It's not going to be a habit.
Yes.
Like, that's a good way to put it.
That's a good way to put it. You know, there was actually something I heard recently that there is a signal response in the body when the taste buds feel that
cephalic insulin response.
Yeah. So the body thinks that the insulin is coming, but the insulin never comes because it actually hasn't released any. Yep. So it confuses the body. Yeah. Which I don't like. That for me is like, no, I'm confusing the hell out of my body right now. It thinks something's coming, and then that response is not coming. So like, I almost feel, like if I had it pre-training or something, like my body thinks that insulin is coming, there's like blood sugar, but there's actually nothing there. So I feel like I'm not in a state there that I'm actually functioning well.
It at least gives you enough to take pause on it, right? Because it's just like, okay, I think the cephalic insulin response is interesting because it seems as though some people end up having it and some people don't. Yeah. So there could be a genetic play, there could be an epigenetic play, there could be a dietary history play. From what I've seen, it's usually people that consume a high amount of sugar to begin with, and then, or high carbohydrate diet, and then add those things in where they get the cephalic insulin response. Whereas someone that perhaps is someone that is maybe more low carb might not get the same response. But either way, it's just, okay, well, something is happening. And that's kind of the point. It's just like, okay, I don't think there's any free rides. Yes. I think everything comes at a certain cost. So then you just weigh it out. Is it something that I really want? Like,
yeah, do you need it? Yeah. I mean, I think there's people who, you know, are overweight and, you know, want to make a change. If you're moving on to stevia sweetened drinks instead of a sugar sweetened drink, 100%, like, are you going to get some benefit from it? And I always say that for people who are starting that kind of journey, that change in their dietary habits to actually make a positive change, do everything you need to do to maintain that journey. You know, like if you need to keep in a diet drink, keep that diet drink in there. Like, be happy. Do not be miserable on this journey. You need to find your journey, which is going to make you go, I'm enjoying this, not this is hell to try and get to where I want to get to. So everyone has to take their own path. And I think, things like stevia sweetened drinks, they have a purpose for sure.
Anything else that you avoid or limit?
I try to avoid, certainly heated seed oils, but seed oils in general, I try to avoid. I mean, I think there's some benefit from actually there's certain seed oils that I know that are, not heated and they're like raw or cold extracted, that there are some benefits from. But generally, anything that's like deep fried or canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, grapeseed oil, all those for me, when I eat them, I do not feel good. And I know the jury's still out on a lot of studies of whether seed oils do this, that, and the other. For me, I do not feel good when I eat them, especially like anything that's been heated to a very high temperature. Even if I cook or as something has been cooked in olive oil and it's been heated too high, clearly, it's been cooked at very high temperature, I won't feel good on it. A lot of restaurants say, we just fry it in olive oil. I'm like, well, what temperature? Because that's been oxidized then. And it, for me, has somewhat of an inflammatory response. Yeah.
No, I don't even think the jury is still out on oxidized oils.
Yeah, I'm trying to please
or peroxidized oils. I think that's there was a study that came out just recently on is it arachidonic acid? I can't remember what it was pretty clear. It was very clear that oxidized oils are problematic.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Like, that's not rocket science. I don't know why this is even still up for debate. Like, oxidized oils are not good. Like, that is not. It's lipid peroxidation. We know that. Even in clinical settings, even in vitro studies, like, we'll literally use peroxidized oils to induce inflammation. Like, I mean, it's just, this isn't up for debate. The question of whether a raw, cold extracted seed oil is good or bad, that's a different question. Mm-hmm. Like, are seed oils inherently bad? Are we not supposed to consume them?
Yeah, that's the big question.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't think there's a problem in consuming a handful of sunflower seeds at all. I think that's perfectly acceptable in my opinion. But I used to think that when I would go out to a restaurant that the reason that I would feel like crap the next day was because of the sodium. I swore up and down. I was like, too much sodium. We used to joke and call it a sodium hangover.
Yeah.
And then I realized that when I have salt, normally I don't feel bad. Like, if I have salty electrolytes or if I add,
feel good.
I feel fine. Maybe a slight bit of water retention, but I don't get that sodium hangover.
Yeah.
And then I started realizing, this is it. And then all I would do is ask them, okay, if I'm getting an omelet, just can you cook it dry? Mm-hmm. I don't care if it's a little burnt or a little whatever. And problem solved. I wouldn't have an issue.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think that whether that is going to be bad for you long term, I can't attest to it all, but I can attest to the short-term feeling and the achiness and the brain fog that would come with oxidized oils otherwise. 100% difference.
Yeah, like I would get like heartburn if I have like seed oil. So like I know that my stomach response, that alone, before it's even gone any further than that for me is like not good. Like I don't want that, and that's for me is a signal straight off the bat that it's not good. I think there is something to be said as well for like, trans fats with high glycemic carbohydrates. For me, that kind of, I just think that can't be good because it's, for me, shuttling to the cells straight away, right? Yeah. And I just think that's going to have an inflammatory response. And I just think, I've learned enough now from eating those foods, or like the times that I've, gone out for a meal and there's a whole group of people and you want to get involved and eat all the food that's there, and like it's amazing cuisine and everything, but there might be a couple of things that are like deep fried. And when I've not been eating that food for a long period of time and then I happen to have some, and normally I feel great after a meal, and then that one meal I'm like, I do not feel good. So for me, that's enough to go, that's not stable for me at all, and I want to avoid it.
And I think in the essence of building muscle, like we're talking about here, it's, if that's going to make you achy and that's going to make you feel like crap, I mean, the number one stimulus for building muscle is going to be the training. Yes. So if you're feeling like crap and you're not able to give it your all, I think that's probably the biggest lever you can pull or not pull. Yeah,
100%. Like for me, getting up every morning, feeling good, feeling like I want to train is paramount, and also like just life. Like I've got 2 little kids who want my energy. Like if I feel like sluggish because of food I've eaten, that was my decision to eat that food. So I know that I'm going to have that response. So for me to go out with my kids and then feel like crappy all day because of something, because of a decision I made, for me, that's the biggest thing. And the thing that I learned is like, I'm in control of every decision I make when it comes to eating food. So take control. Like that's on me. I'm solely responsible for the food that I put in my mouth. People say like, oh, but it's hard. It's like, well, yes, it is hard because it's so easy to eat those things. But ultimately, it's your decision. You're accountable. So make yourself accountable. If you want to make a change, it's all on you at the end of the day. And I hold myself to a very high standard of that because, like I owe it to the people around me. I owe it to my kids to feel good for them and like give them the best version of me.
I mean, at the end of the day, man, like we are energetic creatures, and our kids, our family, they pick up on the fact that like if our energy is crap, whether it's the physical energy that we actually are like, hey, I have the energy to go play with you, or the difference between someone that's lying on their deathbed, the energy they exude is obviously different than someone that is a pro athlete that's bounding on the field, right?
Sure.
Like there's an energy that's exuded, and like kids pick up on that stuff.
They do.
Man, they do. It's like when you're down and like they're just kind of like, kids just demand your energy in one way or another, whether you're physically playing with them or not. There's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, take complete ownership over the fact that like I need to take, whether it's nutrition, whether it's training, I need to take ownership of what I need to do to be able to give my family the all that they need. And it's just,
I've seen my daughter's face. Like if I've had that, sluggish feeling or whatever, and she wants me to go jump around on the trampoline or something. And if I'm like, I can't right now, Bubba, I'm a little bit, I'm just doing this, I'm doing that. The disappointment on her face, I never want to see that. So for me, I'm like, no, I'm like, I'll go, okay, I'll come. Yeah. But I never want to see that. I never want to see her be like, oh, daddy doesn't want to play with me. So for me, like you say, I have to take accountability and have to be responsible enough to go, right, I've got to do everything I can do to make sure I'm always like, let's go.
It's only going to take like a couple hundred times of you saying no before they're just over it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah,
and you're never getting that back, ever.
Yeah.
You're going to spend a lifetime with them as adults, but we're blessed enough to have, this opportunity to have time with our kids when they're kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's something I'm just not sacrificing. Period.
No way.
So.
It's such precious time, man. Yeah. And like you say, they remember.
I want to have the energy to go do what I want to do when they're grown up.
Yes.
I want to be 60 and still be able to be like, okay, babe, you want to go travel now? Or I don't want to be like, no, I hurt. I just want to stay home.
Yeah. I have that memory of my dad, because my dad, he was, when I was say like 30, he was 60 and he's just had his 70th now. But even when he was 60, we would, every Christmas would go down to Weston-super-Mare Beach in England. They lived in like Bristol. And me and my two brothers and my dad would play full contact American football. And he was a very athletic guy growing up, but for me, that was like, well, he's always been active. He's hammer his body on the drink on the other side of things as well, but he's a high level athlete in his youth. And I was like, that's for me what I want. I want when I'm 60, 65, 70, to still be able to do everything that my kids are like, Dad, let's go and do this. Like I rode motorcycles with my dad. We go off riding together. For me, that was like an example of what I want for my future with my kids. And I think setting that as a precipice, and like something that I want to work towards and something that I can set in stone now is so important, because the decisions we make now dictate what we'll be at that age. So I just think it's so important to set that in stone, like make yourself accountable and like do it now.
I'm with you, man. Well, where can everyone find you, brother?
I'm on Instagram, Tom Hopper Hops. That's the only social media platform I'm on, so they can find me there.
Smart move.
Yeah, cheers, man.